Hey there, Feminist Frequency Radio listeners. This is Kat. Content warning up top. In this episode, we talk about portrayals in film of scenes containing supernatural and or historical acts of violence against women and children, including infanticide. Listen with caution and with care. On to the show.
Just really quick, I wanted to remind y'all that the Games and Online Harassment Hotline is here for you, for your friends, and your colleagues. We provide emotional support to folks who make or play games, which is such a broad range of people. So, you might not need it today, but maybe you need it tomorrow. So we just want you to know about it. You can learn more at gameshotline.org.
All they've known is this hard life, and then their father telling them how they're sinners. It's like, how could you make sense of anything? Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Kat Spada, the newest member of this podcast, and our illustrious host, Anita Sarkeesian, had to flee from our Puritan community and start her own homestead out into the wilderness. So we're just steering this ship ourselves today, and I'm really excited to be joined by a guest today who is one of the Feminist Frequency board members, Dr. KISHONNA GRAY. Hi.
Hey, so excited to be here. Kat, thanks for hosting. I'm super excited about this.
This is a fun one, and, we actually had to postpone the recording, which gave me a little more time to beef up on my Eggers filmography viewing.
Fancy. I love it. I love it very much.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about yourself. Yep. I'm sure you've been on the show before, and and listeners will have heard you, I believe, talking about gaming and talking about intersectional gaming theory.
Absolutely. Excited to do that. So I'm KISHONNA GRAY, Associate Professor in Writing, Rhetoric, and Digital Studies at the University of Kentucky. And, I think I've been on here like a couple times, talking about, different kinds of things. And, I research gaming. I'm a Black digital scholar. My theoretical focus, of course, is intersectionality and intersectional identity. So I love applying those kinds of concepts to see what's happening inside the gaming space, to see how communities are developed, to see, the resistance practices that people might employ and stuff. And I love doing Feminist Frequency Radio because it just puts me all outside the box, all in another lane, a space that's not mine at all. Because I'm all like, all right, what are we watching this week? And I'm like, what? Oh my gosh, I have no idea. So I like, that it makes me, kind of push the gray matter a little bit to kind of, kind of think differently about things and, engage in other kinds of content. So I always appreciate this podcast.
Well, it's awesome. Seems like a perfect fit to have come in as a board member with your experience in gaming. And then, this is what I loved about Feminist Frequency as a listener, and now getting to be a part of the show is being critical of the media you love. Yeah. Sometimes I would feel like, should I feel guilty that I had problems with something, or should I feel guilty that I still loved the thing even when I had problems with it? So I think it's a fun to push ourselves, like you said, get that gray matter going.
That's true. And you also have to think about, especially with this content that we engage in, like on a regular basis, sometimes, just to have a break from all the struggle and the pain and the nonsense and the racism and sexism and homophobia, like to get a break from all that stuff, we really have to turn the lens off, right?
Yeah.
Because I remember sometimes, folks are always asking me, well, KISHONNA, you're so critical of games. How can you play that? I'm like, because I just have the ability to turn some things off, and that's also, I don't want to turn like the things it's a balance too that we have to strike, right? I remember seeing a tweet from a prominent scholar, or a prominent streamer in the space. They said I should have never turned my hobby into work, talking about the streaming economy and talking about, all the labor that's involved in that, right? And so I always want to make sure that gaming stays fun for me, and that if it's ever like too intense, that, I take a step away and I do something else. And so I think that's how I'm able to stay in the space, because there are some moments when it gets really awful, but then there are some, flashes of goodness and some really awesome, some really awesome bits that, I want to focus on. It's funny because we had started watching this it's trash TV. It's so awful. It's like a reality TV show, one of those dating ones of like all these women in the house, they're vying for one dude. And it's just so awful on so many levels. We could write books, volumes of books, Kat, about, like these shows, but I just turn it off and I just laugh. And should I feel guilty for that? Like, is that bad that I turn my feminist lens off? Like, is that bad?
No. I mean, I think that would be, I mean, that's the that's puritanical, right? Like, you can't live an ascetic, total lifestyle. And there's this, I don't know exactly what her title is. I'll say like a psychologist. She runs an Instagram account called Struggle Care. And it's about mental health and dealing with taking care of yourself and your household. And sometimes if you're struggling with your mental health, it's hard to get those dishes done. And one of her key points is you can't save the rainforest when you're depressed. Yeah. And I kind of think about like, man, there have been those hours where I'm like, I just need to rewatch season 6 of RuPaul's Drag Race. Yes. And I know there's no drama to it because I know exactly what's going to happen.
Right.
And I mean, that's not even something where I'm like, oh, I have to turn off my principles to watch. Right. But it's still just something where I'm like, I need to be in a real mushy space.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
I've actually been rewatching Downton Abbey.
Oh, is that a good one?
Sure. That's the thing. I'm like, there is something that's like, it's just like wrapping up in a blanket. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't care. I don't think about much when I'm watching this. It's just, it's pretty.
I love it. I love that.
Yeah.
And I feel that way like about rom-coms. I know they're so trashly heterosexual, heteronormativity. And I'm like, I love it. I'm like, are you going to get the man? Yes, you're going to get the man at the end. Good for you. You know what I'm saying? It's so bad.
So I'm like a fairly casual gamer in that I went to all girls school growing up, and I didn't know that people played video games until I got to college. And I was like, oh, people still do that. Like we had a Nintendo when I was a kid, and then, then that was it. That was the end of video games, right?
Yeah.
Got to college, everyone was playing Halo. It was a big surprise.
Yeah.
So I only, during the pandemic, my best friend bought me Animal Crossing. And
Beautiful.
It was like, it's an interesting thought of like, I am turning off thinking about work so I can go work for this raccoon who is very interested in me, like, turning a profit.
Yeah. Yes.
Like, I'm like fully like there, but there's something that's just very de-stressing about it, and I know not all games experiences are for de-stressing, certainly, but
right, because a lot of them are completely opposite. I was just doing one. It's so intense and high level. I'm just like, what am I even doing in this space? Kind of similar to this movie Witch that y'all had me watching. What in the world did y'all have me watching?
Okay, I'm I don't have a great answer for you. I think maybe there was a text thread that maybe brought up, do you like horror movies?
Love horror, but I think Anita doesn't. So we had to do like horror light. I remember. Okay.
Yeah. So I think, I had wanted to see the Northman, and I was like, the people talk about The Witch. People talk about this movie from 2015 that I would struggle to say that it redefined the genre or anything. Yeah. But I do think it started a trend in recent kind of art house horror movies. And I had never seen it. So I think that's where we got going.
Okay. All right. Now, listen, my witch senses were very, very upset. Very upset, right? So I'll let you introduce us, like, because I'm sure you probably have like a little bit to get us into this movie.
We'll do the blurb, but I feel like we should circle back to like, what does it mean when you say that you love horror? Because I think that could mean a lot of different things.
It does.
But yeah, so okay, here's where we're at. We with Robert Eggers' Viking epic The Northman recently debuting in theaters, we went back and watched his first movie, The Witch, a film that asks the question, wouldst thou like to live deliciously? If you've seen the movie, you probably know what that means. You might not. even if you've seen the movie. This film stars Anya Taylor-Joy in her breakthrough role as the teenage daughter of a family of Puritans in the 1630s whose lives are torn apart by a series of devastating events. As vague, I wrote that purposely vague because we'll have to get into it. The movie blends genres and builds tension and uses a naturalistic filmmaking technique to tell a story that's based on Eggers' childhood fascination with witchcraft in Jacobean New England. And I kind of reference this, but I feel like there's this micro niche of movies that A24 puts out, which is a successful bit of like horror that doesn't feel as pulpy as maybe mainstream horror films have in the past. But I'm curious for us to talk about, and Anita's not with us. She said she'd watched it before and didn't like it. And
for real? That's what she said?
Yeah.
Did she give any reasons why?
No, I'm curious because I mean, just to, to lead with the conclusion, like I really liked it as a filmmaking experience. Yeah. Watching it, I thought
you want to start there. Let's start there aesthetically before we get into like the narrative.
Yeah, aesthetically, as like a vehicle for themes, I'm not so sure, but as like a as a naturalistic movie. That was really what was most interesting to me. Yeah,
absolutely. Now, I didn't come up in the theater or anything like that, but I like single scene kind of movies, right? It was very, so to me, we were all like the outdoor environment was, I think, the prominent part and a prominent feature, right? I'm even thinking about the opening, like the trees. There was so much focus like on the trees, and then the trees were like a heavy narrative. But I don't remember at any point where somebody said, "Oh, the trees are bad," right? Or like you don't go out there into like that space, and that I couldn't figure that part out, right? And then also I'm thinking about the other scene, we either were in the trees, like outside in the outside space, or inside like the cabin, which seemed to be probably like a little one room kind of cabin, right? So it's, it's a period piece, right? I don't even know what are we in? What's this, 1700s? What is this?
1630s.
Oh my God. Oh my gosh. Okay. Cause see, I'm no historian either. So I'm just like, some colonizing time, right? Colonizers landed and their lives are just gone to shit, right?
Yeah.
So, yes. And so that's even more significant to me, so this is really early settler colonial, kind of days and themes that are happening, right? So you said we're in New England, right? It's like probably Massachusetts, probably.
Yeah, probably. And this is over 100 years before the Revolutionary War. So this is early days of English people. Well, I guess early days.
Yeah.
They've been here since the 1400s.
Anyway. Yeah. Okay.
This is me just patching together Wikipedia.
That's all right. That's all right. That's what we're going to do because I love it. So it's good to set the stage, right? So it's very minimalistic, and they put us like in the day, like some days, like in the life of what it means to be like a Puritan, like in this era, right? And then, so I guess we can, I don't know where you might want to start, but it starts off pretty intensely. In this courtroom setting with this judgment being handed down in ways that did we ever find out what happened? What did Dad do?
We don't find out. And
oh my gosh.
It's so interesting. Like it starts with Dad, who this guy's amazing. And he's a character actor. He's all over the place. Ralph Ineson.
That's his name? Okay.
Yeah. What a voice. I mean, he's just got such like a powerful voice, and it starts with him defending his actions to the court, and his daughter is kind of looking at what's happening. Yeah. And it's interesting because throughout the movie, I'm like, is this going to be a bad guy? And I know that's like a oversimplification, but I'm like, all right, is he going to be a bad guy? Is he going to be abusing his kids? Is he going to be beating his wife? Is he going to kill somebody? Like, where are we going with this creepy guy?
Right.
And maybe that's just because of how it started or just what I assume.
Are we used to that kind of narrative, like in this genre too? Like, are we used to, like, oh, the evil, man kind of villain? No, honey, you can't go.
Yeah.
You gotta go somewhere else. Kitty's gotta go somewhere else, Kitty. Maybe we're just used to that, right? We need to know who the characters are. We need to know what role they're going to play. And we need to know that early. But this kind of whatever they did with the mixing of these genres, that didn't hold up at all. You know,
Yeah.
I started to feel bad for the dad.
Right. Same. I was like, okay, maybe he's in this community and they're telling him to, I don't know, telling him to live a way that he doesn't feel is right. And
what could that be? Now, I'm no historian, but what could it be? But it was something so egregious that he disrupted the religious sensibilities, right?
Yeah. And there's so much of everything has got to be by the book, like the Bible, which is the Puritan, as far as I know, that's like the Puritan way. There's no interpretation. Right. It's just how memorize these words and everything has to be by it.
Right.
So yeah, it's like, were they saying you're too strict? Were they saying you're not strict enough? You let your daughter show her ankle that one time? Like, who knows? Who knows? Who knows?
And I don't know. I was trying to catch up on that one part. You remember where he had to like divulge about selling the silver or selling the cup? Like, was that before they left? So I was like, maybe did it have something to do with that? I don't know. There was just so much unknown.
Yeah. There's like one shot right when they're leaving the town, the village, where there's some like Native American guys walking away. And I thought there was some reference of like, oh, I sold it to traders, like to fur traders or something.
Oh my gosh. So did he engage with business with the indigenous population?
Maybe. And
oh my gosh.
Would that have been typical or not? To me,
it seems like it would have been typical, right? Especially in those early days, there was a lot of negotiating, like back and forth. Interesting. Okay. And also, I know we're jumping in. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask you, like, I think this is, we're probably in the same boat. Like, what do you know about, when you start watching this movie, what do you know about Puritans and witches? Like, what's your baseline that you're coming in from?
I've got no baseline at all. But what I know, I do know, I have probably a little more knowledge of like witches, which is why maybe that's probably the reason that Anita didn't like it, right? Because they're not changing the narrative or changing the story like at all, like around witches, right?
Yeah.
And also I think but as far as like Puritans, like escape religious persecution, but then started to re-implement religious persecution, like in very significant ways. A lot of paranoia, a lot of paranoia, a lot of fear, was driving them. A lot of the unknown, they're in this new land, a new way of life. There's this indigenous population that, they don't know friend or foe, right? And so an over-reliance on faith and an over-reliance like on family and making sure that family structure is kept together and you have the appearance that, hey, we got our shit together still, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like what I feel like that's like my baseline.
Yeah. I feel like I read The Crucible as a teenager and I watched the movie, which I think has Winona Ryder in it. Oh, I kind of remember the movie. Like, I remember like saying like good wife, like goody Spada is over there. And she, and like that kind of culture of whispers and that culture of like, if you see somebody behaving badly, you could mark them as a witch or you could like tarnish their reputation and that could be life or death for them.
Absolutely.
And then, like in high school, I think I went to Boston on a field trip and I don't know. That's it. I went to Boston. I feel like I bought
that one time in Boston, that should be the name of this one.
I feel like I have somewhere, a replica of some document that was like stained to look like it was old. Like that's of the vaguest of memories. But what was interesting thinking about like this family, and it's just the family, like they're not in a society, it's just them, is you would think they're subsistence farmers, right? They're just going to be like, look, there's basics. We got to water the corn. We have to grow it. We have to hunt. We have to get ourselves surviving. But there is so much of like, but if one of us sinned, God might have blighted the crops. So it's like, it
something's
like
gone down. Somebody's done a thing. And maybe that's the like who done it kind of thing in the household. Because you kind of feel like that, like who's the evildoer in the household? Yeah. Who's bringing the sin to the house? Who has cursed the family's name? I feel like we spend so much significant time. And remember, even where the scenes were like, they were talking about like the confession scenes where the dad confessed something, the mother confessed something. She likened herself to Job's wife. She was like, I have not upheld my covenant as like a wife. And then they're like, well, maybe it's the kids, maybe the kids. And so it was like this whole blame game of like, who defiled the house and brought sin in here and has cursed us, right?
Yeah.
It was really intense. It was
definitely going to be one of the women.
Clearly. Had to be, right? And I made me think about like the women and the children, like, and then think who then got punished, right? When they locked them away. We're fast forwarding. Should we backtrack a little bit and kind of, okay, so the opening scene, I'm sorry.
So, I mean, here's and this is why I wanted to kind of circle back like to what it means to say like, I love horror movies, or is this a horror movie? Do you think this is like a horror film? Like, I wasn't so sure. I felt like it was a drama with gore. You know what?
I just want to look up what constitutes a horror. Well, I guess we could talk about it. What would constitute like a horror? I'm not even going to look at what I just Googled right there. So,
and I'm not like a huge horror fan, but I've definitely, I've seen plenty that I enjoy. There's,
actually, this is pretty useful. Okay, so I'm going to tell you. You let me know at what point The Witch upholds the themes of the horror genre. Okay. So the themes, they reflect, they're a reflection of the culture and the fears of the time. So what does Witch have for that? Witch has that. Tell us about that. What does Witch have from that?
Well, it's all about, and it's like giving us a story that says witchcraft is real. This is a part of this world. And if you make a covenant with the devil, then you can have riches of some sort, but it will cause death and destruction.
Yeah, absolutely. Because one under that theme of, the fears of the time, like invasion is one. And so that invasion could be the invading of sin and then all these awful things that come in when you allow sin to come into the home. So it's a really interesting take on invasion, right? The next one is character types, right? So you have, besides the killer, monster, or the threat, the various subgenres contain certain hero archetypes, right? So I would say, so let's think about the different archetypes that we have. We've got the father figure, right? We have, of course, the mother role. And then we have, I guess, the slutty whore girl child. My poor thing.
Poor thing.
How many times did they call her a slut?
She didn't do a thing. Like,
anything.
Her brother, and like, maybe I'm going to sound like a total creep. Like, I didn't even judge him that much. Like, he kind of saw part of her boob one time and was like, he's about to hit puberty. Like, all right.
Absolutely. With people in close proximity, you're going to see boobs. You're going to see, you're just going to see it. They're in one room.
It wasn't like he then took that to the next level of I'm going to tell my sister anything about it. Like, he just was like, I saw kind of part of a boob. Like,
but isn't that interesting, especially in some of those very fundamentalist, kinds of environments where the blame then gets put on. I even think the dad said something to the older sister about you bequeath your brother. Like you made him look at you. You made him you made him do this, because you got titties now. So you made him look at your titties, so they really like villainized her. Right?
Yeah.
They really did. Okay, the next one. Okay, the setting. So of course there are different kind of settings: Gothic, castle, small town, outdoor spaces, haunted house. So of course we got the perfect setting in this outdoor setting. The unknown is beyond the tree line. So I would say that these are some of the elements. I would say that it fits like a horror genre perfectly. But then we've got some other genres that are happening in there, right? It's not. I mean, what's like the setting of those kind of this Puritan 1600 era, like colonial genre? Is that a genre? Colonial movies, or those are period pieces?
I guess, I mean, it becomes, just like a historical fiction. And this is where like, and it's so hard to think about a time before we could research, before you could just Google any question you had, like while watching a movie or right after you get out of the theater. Because what I know about this movie, now that I've looked it up, is that this filmmaker was from the theater. He was fascinated always with this time period and witchcraft and Puritans. Yeah. And so he like got a bunch of historical texts and tried to make a movie based on like, this is how witchcraft was described in documents from the era. And so that to me is what makes it a little more interesting. Like the fact that he was saying, I'm just showing you, like I'm using cinema techniques to show you the types of stories this father and mother might have told their children about witches when families were actually talking about this stuff.
Absolutely.
But like, if I didn't know how close to maybe text and stuff the movie was, I might not be as impressed. But I don't know. Like, it's hard. You can't undo the Googling. Right. So.
Absolutely. And this didn't come from a book first, right?
No.
Okay. So we don't. No. So it's not like we're missing elements. I'm like, oh, the book was better because they put those elements in there and they forgot that part.
No.
Okay.
He wrote it. He directed it based on finding bits of old stories and.
I gotcha.
Paper from trials and stuff. Now, did you feel like it was particularly scary or hard to watch at any point?
There were some cringe moments, the caressing of the baby. I'm like, what's she about to do to this baby? I'm like, oh, that's what she's about to do to this baby, right?
Turn him into a paste.
Right. Oh my gosh. So that was a lot, right? That was intense. Yeah. And then I had to think like, is this really happening? And the only thing that made me think, like, did that really happen? And did the sister just do something to this baby? Was when the brother was taken, I thought the brother was, was enticed by the attractive, woman in the woods, but then he came back, so I was like, well, she didn't kill him. So maybe all of this is like, they've conjured this up in their minds that there's this fear out there. And then it was like mass hysteria or whatever, I was thinking like, is this even really happening to any of them? Right.
Yeah. And I guess a lot of this is probably just ways to explain away the horrors of life, right? Like when you live somewhere where a wolf might eat your baby, maybe you need to make a story up that somehow helps you process that. Although I don't know how it's any worse to think like, oh yeah, a coven of witches turned him into a paste so they could fly on brooms. I might be like, we need to put a fence up if it's a wolf. If it's a witch, I don't know what we do. But like, I guess a lot of this is just how do you deal with grief and fear and terror. But
yes.
There was a movie that came out a couple years after this called The Nightingale. It's kind of similar in the sense that it's about a convict in Australia. So like an Irish convict in the early days of Australian settler times. And she's consistently victimized. Like it's just a movie where you're like, let's watch this woman get victimized over and over. That genre. And there is an explicit scene of a baby's murder in that movie, The Nightingale.
Goodness gracious.
And I remember watching that movie and being like, oh my God, like this is a rare time where I'm like, I don't know. Can I keep watching the movie? Do I need to like turn it off?
Yeah.
So when I was watching this one, I was like, oh shit. Like I didn't even know that was like a thing that I cannot watch, but it's.
Yeah.
But then when the witch, she's like caressing the baby, but then they cut away.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, that to me is more horror movie. In The Nightingale, we're watching like a historical drama about stuff that happened.
Oh my
we
gosh.
We know that that people have been violent in history and always. Like we know that's real. in The Witch, it cuts away. You don't exactly know what happens next. Like, that to me feels like more of a horror movie because you kind of have to make it up.
We have to fill in the blanks. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you don't always see the monster, or you don't, you know, there's something that's then a little more mythical about it.
Right.
Than just, you know, a serial killer.
Right.
Cut people's heads off or whatever.
Right.
Like,
absolutely. Yeah. And that's why what made me think about that then the witch narrative was made up, right? You know, to explain away, maybe did the sister, you know, do something to the baby, or, you know, somebody, you know, and then maybe she was like, I just did this horrible thing. I've got to, and then, you know, the mind fractures, and then, you know, tries to, you know, create like other narratives. But we don't know that she didn't do anything with the baby, right? Even I know she was playing peekaboo with the baby, and then the baby was gone. But then she could have been like, you know, walked out into the woods, did something, and came back like, oh my gosh, this happened to the baby. Because even when she was even saying, you know, when she was picking with her younger siblings, by the way, what happened to them? Did they ever show their bodies? And what happened to them after being, you know, boarded up inside the little shed?
I felt like, so then the witch landed on the roof of the shed.
Yes.
And then,
which could have been either of the parents. That could have just been the horror of the parents who have just lost their minds. And they put you know what I'm saying? But go ahead. We'll proceed as if there is this witch.
Well, yeah, because you don't always know which, like, I could have believed that the teenage girl was a witch the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the little kids are in the shed and they look over and they see this old crone like eating a goat or like drinking its blood.
Yeah.
But then you see Anya Taylor-Joy screaming. But like, as far as I know, she was the old crone right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so that's just what I want to go back and look, because in that scene, I have no idea what happened like to their bodies. Because even when she met up with like the coven, like towards the end, I didn't see any of the body types.
Right.
You know, none of the body types match the body type of the witch that we have been seeing that whole time. Now, I'm not sure that if that matters, or I'm not sure but I'm just like, are these just like the witches that are going to get blamed for everything that has just happened, right? And they're out here just naked and having a good time. You know, they, you know, talking to the trees, you know, doing all that stuff. And then are they getting ready to get blamed for all the horrors that the families have done to themselves? You know?
Right. So here's like the kind of question that I still have about well, by the way, according to Wikipedia, the only source I ever go to,
I love it.
The twins are missing after the goats have been eviscerated.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I loved those kids, by the way. They were
Me too.
Hilarious.
Me too. Is there any folklore associated with the Black Phillip song? Because that was like an anchoring song, you know, the whole time. And I was watching that scene, and my kids had walked by and they heard it. They said, Black Phillip, that sounds racist. I was like, oh, you know, it might be.
Yeah, it seemed to me, it's so funny, on Google, Black Phillip is the main antagonist of the 2015 horror film The Witch. I guess. I mean, that's what they say.
The goat?
Yeah, that's what Google has to tell us. I mean, I know obviously that there's a lot of goat imagery in like devil lore throughout the centuries.
That is true. Where did that come from? Look, off to Wikipedia.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's descriptions of Lucifer, you know, the fallen angel, and maybe the cloven hooves. It probably even goes back further than that too. Oh, interesting. So let me share with you what I just read. So goats are often categorized as chaotic, hard to train, untamable, right? So can you imagine man coming along wanting to tame this beast so it can bend to his will, right? And then he's not doing it. But also sexual beings. So I guess goats like to have sex and mate and stuff. So could you imagine being a goat and you just over there fucking, and then you appear to owner? It's just like, oh, hell no, we don't do this. You ain't married. You can't do this. You know what I'm saying? So I could easily see, you know, how goats could be like, look at them. They just defy, you know, nature and are just doing these interesting things. So that's so interesting that the goat, you know, is there. I forget about like the demonic imagery associated with the goat. Yeah. The thing that So the thing that I don't think I've totally followed, and maybe it's not supposed to be clear, is the timeline of the what would be the word? The accord between, like, it seems like if you're going to be a witch, you have to, like, she has to sign the book at the end.
Yeah.
That's kind of the whole thing, is like, all right.
Yeah.
We are now giving you the choice. You can sign up here or not.
Right.
And I guess, I mean, we could get a little too deep into, like, my theological questions from growing up Catholic or whatever.
Oh, let's do it.
So, okay, sure. Let's start in the book of Genesis. No, I've always struggled in the book of Genesis with the notion of choice, of, like, human free will.
Say more.
That if Adam and Eve, and I know this is oversimplifying it, were given the choice to eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and that by doing so they would be creating original sin, I am not sure how they actually had choice. If they were these babies in the Garden of Eden who were given this covenant by an all-knowing, all-powerful God. I feel like the choice was already made. You're going to do this. Yeah. I don't... And then what's going to happen? I already know what's going to happen because I created it all and I know everything. I felt the same way here, where it's like, if you've just destroyed this whole girl's family and you've given her tons to be afraid of, and the other side of things is basically saying, do you want a full life of misery and pain and agony, or would you damn your soul to hell just so that you can have a little bit of pleasure? Where's the choice in that? Of course you're gonna. That's right. Of course you're gonna become a witch.
That's right. You're absolutely right. And then I don't know if I understand even the significance of, remember when brother threw up the apple?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that? That was such an intense scene. But then I'm thinking about what he told mother. Remember he said they found an apple tree, but there was nothing on it. So did he actually see it and ate something? You know what I'm saying?
Or it was just his lie. Like that, because that's when he lied about the father. Oh, I sold the cup to get the trap for hunting or whatever. Yeah. And the brother was like, no, I was going to look for an apple to make you feel better after your baby died. So that was like his lie coming up.
Oh, the original sin. Was that his original sin? Was that his first one? Oh, looking at his sister's titties. Which one was the original sin?
I can't remember what order. You know, which comes first, the apple or the titties? God.
That needs to be the name of this episode, Kat.
I'm gonna stitch that on a pillow.
Oh my gosh, that's perfect. Oh my gosh. But then go ahead.
Well, talk to me about, I love also that we're just calling them mother, brother, father, sister, and the kids.
I'm terrible with names. Caleb is the boy.
Yeah.
Thomasina? Thomason's the sister.
Thomason. I think we'll go with family designations and then Black Phillip.
Okay.
Talk to me about mother.
Oh my gosh. So mother's pretty intense. Mother's devout. She's committed. Yeah. She's committed to her family. She's committed to working for her family, right? She doesn't like secrets. She doesn't like when things go haywire, right? She doesn't like not knowing and not having control. And I think that I don't know what happened between, I'm sure they were fractured when, he was like, well, we're just going to leave the village. We're going to leave the plantation. We're going to leave. Right. And of course the man decides. So he's just making all these decisions and their lives are just deteriorating over time and over time. Right. Mother has reached her breaking point. That's why she had to slap the shit out of him, right there in that moment. Right. When she found out, all these lies and, they're allowing all this sin and all this evil into the world. And she just gave them specific rules of how to govern ourselves. And if you just follow these rules, then our lives will be okay. Right. So she's just like and really after losing the baby. So I remember that one scene where we just hear her, is it crying? And then everybody's like awake, just like kind of like listening.
Yeah. And she's like animal. She's lost her she can barely make words.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we'll just go ahead and use that patriarchal framing. She's hysterical, right? She's hysterical. And
uterus is just roaming free
that's
throughout
right.
the body.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think that was something so significant when the vision came to her that she was nursing the baby again.
Mm.
And then there was just the bird, the crow. Because doesn't the crow have some significance? Because when the scene cuts back to reality for us, then it's this black crow just feasting on her breast.
I think that those birds would be a foretelling of death.
Okay.
I think that's what they would be. It's like if you saw one, it was a bad omen.
Okay. So here we go. More. And also the usage of animals in the film it was intentionally placed and intentionally like significant. Like the goat. I don't think I had paid any attention to this goat, the whole time, just until they were like, the goat is the one of these kids been talking to. The kids are the witches. I was like, oh, they have been singing to this goat the whole time. Black Phillip is the goat. Like, I completely missed that, right?
Right. And you're just thinking, it's super boring to live in the woods. They're not old enough to have, like, that many chores yet to keep them busy. What are they going to do? Read the Bible? They can't read. I don't think these kids can read. So you got to sing to a goat. What else are you going to do?
That's right. Absolutely. You got to sing to the goat. What other animal references then do we have? So we've got
there's the horse. Like the horse is their lifeline. If they lose the horse, they can't get to town. They can't carry an injured boy into the village or whatever.
And it was over after that, especially when Thomasina and Caleb went into the forest. That's when they lost the horse right there, right?
So it seemed like, man, so I am now thinking that the order of everything is either that big sister was a witch from the jump.
Yeah.
And that's why they even had to leave the village. And that she was the cause of everything. Or she's the last one of all of them to finally make a deal with the devil. Because the father lies about the cup. The mother eventually, like when she is in her grief, she's like, just give me my sons back, whatever that takes. And that's like her switching over. The little kids sing to the devil goat. And the middle brother, he goes to the witch's house in the woods and like gives over to her or whatever.
Yeah.
So everyone made some kind of deal with sin.
That's true. Oh my gosh, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
But who knows who started it?
Oh my gosh. That's so, I love this framing that you then have for me, right? And I think it makes me look like my mind's just like turning and thinking about all kinds of things. And then that goes back to then saying, was the witch even real? Like at all?
Yeah.
She was just the thing that symbolized all the ills and all of the debauchery, right? That the family then was engaging in, right?
Yeah.
And then, but why? Because everybody died except the sister.
Yeah.
So how did she live? Was it because, so then maybe she, well then, so was she a witch all along or not a witch until the end then? Maybe she was the one that was protected. Like, so then is it going back to this puritanical sense of where, like you gotta protect yourself and only, the Trinity and, the Bible can protect you. Cause look, Thomason made it because she didn't give in. But then at the end, all this thing is going down. So she had to give in. Finally, she had to, maybe, I don't know.
So let's like dive in now to that last scene from the moment that Black Phillip, that she's like, all right, Black Phillip, level with me.
Yeah.
Are you a witch or the devil? Have you been talking to my siblings? What's happening?
Yeah.
I mean, this movie came out 7 years ago. I did feel like I kind of knew what the ending was. Like I'd heard a little bit about it. What was your reaction to the goat become man and like the way he talks to her? And
right. So technically he wouldn't be a witch, right? What would his designation then be? Because aren't there gender roles in the witch world?
Yeah, I mean, either he's like a warlock, which I don't know if that's just a Harry Potter talk or if that's like, I mean, I think that's an old-fashioned word. Or he could just have been like the devil's familiar or something, like some kind of creature that facilitates things for the coven.
Or then also, can this be kind of like that coming of age story where the witch or the devil presented itself in the ways that made sense to each person in the family, right? Like feeding into like their desires and so she's coming of age, you know, she's at an age where she's probably curious about sex, you know, I'm sure she probably wants to masturbate. You can't masturbate. I'm sure Puritans, you know, probably would chop your hands off like for that, you know, so she has all these hormones happening, right?
She's sleeping on the thatch roof above her parents' bed.
Right. Yeah. And then think about like the dad's desires, like what he's money, economics, you know, he's selling stuff, bartering, you know, and then I'm trying to think about, you know, even with the kids, of course, just playing, you know, not focused enough on their chores, lazy, you know, can't get focused, you know, that sounds like, you know, the kids sin, right? So maybe then the devil is then coming to them, like manifesting itself in a way that makes sense. So which is why it could be like a man for her, you know, for Thomason, like at the end where she's like, finally, oh my gosh, I've waited for this forever. Oh my God. You know what I'm saying? Like I desire, I burn for you. You know, and then, so then the witch presents as like a man, maybe. So then what's the mother? I feel like the mother's narrative was not developed enough. I feel they always do this.
Yeah. All she wants is her babies, and she wants to go home. She wants to go back to England. At one point, she says that. Okay. I may not have caught that enough. Oh, yeah. No, I remember. She wanted to return. Yes. But it's like this whole story is just like they're always pushing out, like why did they leave England, then why did they leave the village, and then now why did they leave the safety of their farm to like go into the woods? And it's like maybe it would have been better if you had just stayed.
Absolutely. But then whose narrative is that, right? What kind of narrative then are we putting forth, that stay here in the safety of us, you know, the Puritan fundamentalists, you know, we are the ones that can protect you and keep you safe from all those evils in the world. See, look what happened to you. You went out there, you know, you engaged, you know, you opened Pandora's box, you engaged in the world, you ate that apple, and then look at you, look what happened to you. And then because really that's like almost every horror genre is like rooted in this narrative of like, if you would have just, you know, said your prayers, you would have been just fine. Yeah, I can't think. I'm thinking like The Conjuring, like well, no, she's like an evil nun, and I don't really know The Conjuring enough. But I feel like there's like the church is the savior, right?
Right.
The church, The Exorcist, you know, that kind of like genre. Like the church is then like the savior, and they went so far away from that, then you know there was like no coming back. They couldn't turn back.
And it's such like a narrow. I mean, to have such a narrow view of the world at all. Like even these kids, I think the two oldest kids had even been born in England, but they can't read. She says at the end, she's like, I can't write my name in the book or whatever. All they've known is this hard life. And then their father telling them how they're sinners. It's like, how could you make sense of anything?
Oh my gosh, I have no idea. And then just that rote memorization of then like the prayers and the scriptures and, you know, and then, you know, just relying on it and hoping that saves you. And then you're like, it doesn't save us. Like, wait a minute, y'all told us this would save us. And then it's not saving us, you know? I felt so bad for Caleb. I think I felt the worst for Caleb.
Yeah, he was often trying to do the right thing. I'm going to try to help my family.
Yeah. He really was. And then he had a terrible time there, you know? and I was also thinking there was something a bit erotic when he was finally crossing over to the pearly gates, you know, when he was, you know, giving in to, you know, his death. And there was something very erotic about that, right?
Yeah.
He gave up the apple. He gave like, okay, I'm forgiving myself of the sin. Oh, I want to come back into the grace. And it was like, it was a lot of those cringe moments, you know?
Yeah, and I don't know enough about the production, but like, that kid was a great actor. He did such a good job in his speeches, but like, what a vulnerable, I mean, this 12-year-old boy maybe, like, he's nude in this movie. He's kissed by an adult woman, you know, like, there's a lot that this kid is put through, the actor. Just
actor.
thinking about it from like a production safety standpoint.
Right. I'm like, what are you subjecting him to? Like, I couldn't imagine being like the parent of this kid. I'm like, he's going to do what? Like, I would be like that. I'm like, well, you got to pay him some more if he got to kiss this grown woman. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, he should be getting like his own reality show by now.
He should. He really should. And I think, yeah. But it was a lot of those moments, where he had to, sit in that moment of, desiring, Thomason, there were like all these moments. He did phenomenal. He did a great job. This is not a US based story, is it? The Witch is based out of where? It can't be US.
Well, like they filmed it, I think, in Canada, but he wanted to film it in the Northeast, in New England.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so who is the writers? The writers are
Robert Eggers. He's a New York guy who, he's
from the States. All right.
And he said something. So, one of the reasons I thought about this movie is I did end up going to see The Northman, his new movie that's a Viking epic.
Ooh, how's that?
I liked it. I mean, the thing, it's so much more bombastic than this movie. Like, it is blood and guts and fire and volcanoes, and it is very exciting. Yeah. Whereas The Witch, you're like, ay, this is tense. What's going to happen next? I really enjoyed that The Northman kind of felt like, in the same way where I was like, I don't think you're writing a new story. The Northman is based on like an old Norse tale that eventually like was the inspiration for Hamlet. Like, it's a pretty standard kind of archetype story. But that he was just like, oh, I'm just using cameras to tell this story. But people have probably been putting this play on for, for centuries, for generations. So if you go into it and you just watch like, I want to see some Vikings cut each other's heads off and whatever, which I found to be very entertaining. But so this was something he said recently. He was like, I'm not interested in telling modern stories.
Oh, okay.
And that's kind of like, on the one hand, I feel like, well, all stories are modern, right? Yeah. Like, you don't need technology or whatever to like tell a story about a family. But also, I just thought that was interesting. Like, he's a young guy. He's made 3 movies. I'm interested to see how that continues. Like, does he just jump around, what's a modern story? Like, if you tell a story from 1995, it's not modern, So
right.
Yeah.
But also, I guess I'm just kind of like intrigued because to me, I always think about, especially when folks like they go into an existing genre where all these narratives exist. Like, we've had so many witch stories, right? Now I'm always thinking, I'm like, what additional story like are you telling?
Yeah.
I really thought we were going to have like this moment of where, we had like a better, like more nuanced conversations around witches and the witch trials, right? Because I mean, there was a lot of harms that were really done to like real folks in the name of Jesus, right? and I guess I'm like, well, you're not. I guess I was so bothered at the end. You remember that little caption?
Yeah, I don't remember.
This film was inspired by many folk tales, fairy tales, and written accounts of historical witchcraft, including journals, diaries, and court records. Much of the dialogue comes directly from these period sources. So I'm just like, okay, but think about all the misinformation and the disinformation and the fake news that the court records and the journals and the diaries then like actually were. So I'm like, you telling like a fake news story, right? What do you think something's like authentic about this?
Right. Well, and if the letter of the law was like, a woman who speaks to her husband in public is a witch, then like there's, all right, well, I guess that was factual for the time.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what he was doing with that little statement there. I'm like, we are you trying to say that what you're doing is like more authentic?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it kind of, it gives over a little bit of responsibility. Like, that's mainly the thing. He's just saying, look, I'm just showing you a scene. I'm not giving it my own perspective on it. And yeah, I guess
is that creative or is that lazy?
I don't know. I don't think it had like. I think this could be a filmmaker who is primarily interested in the aesthetic, and so like, okay, give me a story and I'll tell it beautifully.
Yeah.
And maybe that's. I mean, I don't necessarily think there's anything.
Yeah.
Wrong with that. There's something wrong with that if that's the only type of director there is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if he's like, I want to use natural lighting and I want to get people to make authentic woolen garments for the costumes, like I want you to look at this picture.
Yeah.
And I don't need to come up with the story. Here's a good story from the 1600s.
You know what this reminds me of? So connecting this to like the big gaming debate, like the ludology, narratology debate, right? Where like
you lost me.
Oh my gosh. So the ludology versus narratology debate. Some people think that the narrative matters in games, and some people feel that what you do inside a game, the mechanics and the doing and the making and the creating, that's what makes a game, right? So there's like a huge debate in like game studies about this phenomenon. So it sounds like that this might be like a film, a cinematic example of that same thing. He was like, hey, think about what we did. We only used candles for lights, we were just in the natural space, we wore the actual clothing, like, and then he's not thinking about it. He was like, oh yeah, we can just add something from the court record. Somebody just put some lines together, for the court record, just keep it authentic, and I guess for me, I'm unsettled as a person who consumes, some of this. I'm always thinking about what else can be added and contributed to the story. Now they have a right to just create whatever they want. If it's the same old same. But for me, I'm like, okay, well, you're just telling like another like witch story, and you added some pedophilia in there. I'm like, okay, good for you.
Yeah.
So, but it's really interesting just to hear, more about that, because I love the background story too. So thanks for sharing, that about the director. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely one of those things where I'm like, if this was the only type of movie I could go see, I would want so much more.
Yeah. Yeah.
But because I'm like, I'm okay with this being like an aesthetic success. Even though I am mostly going to care about, I want characters. And like, of course, there's a part of me that's like, oh, I wish, if this was the 1970s, like she would have somehow like killed Black Phillip and like killed all the witches and succeeded and become like the queen of the village.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's not what happened. And so, okay, I'm not like satisfied. But
I think that's me.
But
it's beautiful. I love that word. I was not satisfied at all. And especially at the end, like I really want like a part 2. I'm like, are you just going to live peacefully like with these witches? And then, somebody sees you, and then every bad thing that happens to y'all, you blame it on that weird woman that you saw walking like through the woods, right? Yeah. So it's going to be this cycle that continues to like repeat, right? The sphere of the other, the sphere of the outsiders, the fear of like what's different. And then basically, you're not looking at the root of a lot of your problems, which is this, your I don't want to say blind faith. I can't think of another word right now, but you're just over reliance on faith, this over reliance on this male figure in your life, like to do everything, this over reliance on, the state. Was the state even established in that way? The colonized, I don't know. Right. Well, I guess because they were still part of England. Like, yeah.
And at least they had some kind of local government.
Yeah, absolutely. How did people get picked to leave England? Like, did they just sign up on a lottery? Like, were they, a lot of times, you hear this narrative, like, we got the worst of England. It was all the criminals. And but how did people get picked to like, to jump on these ships and like leave?
I mean, I honestly, my fan fiction mind is like, oh, it was like a Jim Jones cult scenario. You had some rabble rousers in a church who were like, what we got to do? We got to get on this ship, leave everything we know, take only the clothes on your back, and we're going to go do this. And it's going to be glory to God.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're just like, great. Yeah. I'll do it. I'll drink the mead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for watching The Witch, which sounds like it was your favorite movie of all time.
Generous of you, Kat. Very generous.
But we will be back right after this break to share some freakouts.
Hey, are you enjoying the show? If you are, we would love you to support us to keep making it. You know, if you become one of our patrons, not only are you going to do that and allow us to keep making this every week, but also you get access to some perks like bonus episodes, participate in polls to determine future episodes, access to our Discord server, which is only available to patrons, and, you know, I don't know, other things. If you love us, help support us. You can do that at patreon.com/femfreak.
It's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past week. Kishonna, what have you been playing?
You know, there is something that, you know, I've had a range of emotions with this thing. I'm about to tell you just in a second. So I've spent my time being upset and frustrated, but there was a change and now I love it. And that thing is Fortnite. So let me tell you what Fortnite is doing. So Fortnite, you know, most of the audience, probably know exactly what Fortnite is. It's a game. It's, you know, it's one of those games it's like a cultural leech. It's like they appropriate everything. They steal everything. They just co-opt all the things. So they really are becoming, it's like culture vultures, right? But there was one thing, and also it's a very young audience, you know, so, you know, gamers my age, we don't really like interact and engage in that space, but one of the reasons is why, and I think that the olds like me don't play that game is because they have this option to build in Fortnite, and we don't have the capacities, you know, gamers that are like late 20s, 30s, you know, 40s, we don't have the skill set. And that's not something that was like that was natural to us, right? And I think that's why.
So that whole like the Minecraft kind of stuff of like I'm actually going to be building up from the ground, like my setting and everything.
I think it's a generational thing, right? Because think about like the fall off, even from like Atari and like Nintendo, which the 2-button controller, to when we implemented like the analog. Like a lot of people fell off, and that was like a new person's thing, right? Oh, the hand-eye coordination of those millennials, you know, like that kind of conversation. Like I think the same generational kind of conversation happened in Fortnite. So they took the build away. They took the build out of Fortnite, and so all of us millennials are like jumping into Fortnite like hotcakes, and we love it, and it's amazing. And we're so good. We're destroying those folks. Like we go in there, we get dubs left and right, and it's fantastic. And like the young folks, you know, I found, you know, they hate it. They hate not being able to have the protection of the build. So it's really interesting. So we're having a good time in Fortnite these days. Yeah.
My best friend works in esports, and she has shown me a little bit of Fortnite, and I had very little to connect to it on, but I remembered watching friends play The Sims when I was like a teenager, and I was like, is this what I'm watching? It's like The Sims, but like 1,000,000% more technologically advanced.
Yes. Yeah. It's a lot.
Yeah.
What about you?
My freak out this week, it seems so kind of stodgy, I guess, but I can't stop thinking about it. I am loving this show, Julia. That's on HBOMax. It's about Julia Child.
Really?
Yeah. I'm really enjoying the Companion podcast, and I'll tell you why. So this show is about Julia Child and the creation of her TV show, The French Chef, which was started as a Boston area public television show, where she would take a recipe from her cookbook and teach regular old American people how to make a classic French dish. And what's really interesting about the show is like they were almost inventing the cooking show.
I love that.
So even though I'm probably not going to like learn how to make one of these recipes, I'm watching it and thinking, oh yeah, they really had to figure out how do you take a 4-hour recipe and film it in 28 minutes. Mm-hmm. That whole setup is really interesting. And the podcast, what I like about it is that they do this standard, like here's the cast and crew talking about this TV show, but they also will have people from the world of the culinary world come on the podcast and talk about the influence of Julia Child and say, oh, well, in this episode, you saw what happened when X, Y, and Z. But I'm a chef who got my start working with her on the Food Network in the 80s or
yeah.
I don't know, I'm making that up. And now I'm this major chef and I'm going to talk to you. So it's like something I don't know much about. And I'm digging it. And the actress who plays Julia Child is Sarah Lancashire, who's an English actress. And she's so delightful and lovely. And yeah, it's just, it's another kind of yummy show. There's questions, you know, like there's, I was actually joking with former host of this show, Ebony Adams, that I would love to see a panel discussion with all of the HBO series single Black woman character.
Oh, absolutely. Like, oh, that sounds good.
All the shows have like one Black woman, and they all seem like they are kind of fictional pastiches because the actual stories didn't have any Black people.
Yes, yes.
And so I'm kind of curious. I'm like, I want this, like, there's one Black woman on the Gilded Age, there's one Black woman on Julia, there's one Black woman on Minx. Yeah. All of these period pieces that just have like the one lady who's just like, hi.
Just the one. That's it.
Well, we were part of culture too.
Yeah, right? Right? Oh my gosh, right?
So maybe that's a future panel that that we could talk about.
I love that.
Well, on that, thanks so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. Kishonna, is there anything you want to plug or where can people find you online?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on Twitter. It's probably being a whole hot mess. It's at my first and last name, KISHONNA GRAY. I only use Facebook when I'm trying to sell my books. But usually, Twitter is probably like the main space, that I go to, and I'm not going anywhere. I don't care who owns Twitter. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to have to be kicked off. They will have to evict me before I leave Twitter. And also, of course, always, interact, connect with my books, Intersectional Tag. You can buy it at all your retail, any place that sells books, you can find it. So this was really exciting. Thank you, Kat, for hosting and facilitating this conversation. It was really great. Thank you.
So lovely to meet you. Thank you for that. And check those links in our show notes for those books. Our show is engineered by Rob Pera. Carrie Stimson provides technical support. The artwork is by Jamie Varon, and our intro music is by Phil Circus. Thanks for listening. Bye.